Yes.
So if, for example, I was an interested party
Yes.
In a case that was pending before the Supreme Court, and let's say I came to this place, your house, uninvited, and I said, Chief, come on, or whatever. I tried to persuade you.
Yes.
Would that be illegal?
It's illegal in the sense that it breaks the ethical. It's an attempt to break an ethical rule.
Yeah.
But justices understand sometimes. You know, let's say a poor person, a widow, comes to the house and says, I'd like to talk with the Chief Justice. Naturally, my maids will say no.
Yeah.
My wife will say no.
Yeah.
But if it so happens that, you know, I'm there already at the gate and she came to the gate,
Yeah.
I wouldn't punish her just because she approached me and said, I have a son who is imprisoned. Can you please help him?
But that's not if they have a pending case before you.
Well, even if there was a pending case and this woman, as I said, it depends on the circumstances.
Yeah.
And this woman, a widow, you know, she's desperate. I wouldn't tell her, I'll send you to jail for doing that.
Yeah. But if I managed to get into your house and I was...
Well, you'll go to jail.
I would. What if I just called you? Or if I told one of my subordinates to call you and say, Chief, you know...
I will have to shut out. I'll just say, I'm sorry, I cannot talk about that. Put down the phone.
Does it matter if I'm a civilian?
But if you offer me a bribe, I will, of course, charge you.
Directly?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a difference between attempting to influence or persuade you than actually...
Persuading meaning talking only.
Yeah.
Saying, sometimes innocently. I wouldn't hold that against you, especially if you didn't know. But if you offer me a bribe, I'll certainly send you to jail.
What if would it make a difference to you if I were a private citizen or if I were a government official?
Well, government officials we're more strict with them because they should know.
Yeah,
Yes.
That's what I'm getting at, sir.
Yes.
Has that ever happened to you?
That what?
Some government official tried to call you or come to your house and try perhaps to persuade you to rule in their favor or another?
No, because, well, modesty aside, I've had a reputation of not being persuaded. In fact, when people talk to me, the more I'm on the other side.
Yeah.
I tell myself, if this guy is talking with me, that means he believes his case is weak.
And did that ever persuade you to make a decision the other way?
Not really directly, but in case of doubt, that comes to my mind.
Right.
Why is this guy talking to me? He believes his case is not meritorious, you know. But I'll tell you that officials have avoided talking with me about cases. You know, I owe my appointment to the Supreme Court to President Ramos solely. I had no ninong whatsoever.
Yeah.
He offered this to me out of the goodness of his heart. And I'll tell you, he has never asked me any favor in my 11 years in the Supreme Court.
Can you say that about Mr. Estrada and Mrs. Arroyo?
Oh, same thing, yes.
So they've never done that?
No, they have
or
not.
Sent any subordinates to do that?
Well, I have not heard anyone say, oh, the president sent me to talk to you.
So they just make it look like they're
Sometimes they would talk to my wife, or sometimes they would talk to my doctor, but they're told, I'm sorry, we cannot talk to the Chief Justice or the Justice.
The reason I ask is because you always hear whispers about decisions, especially controversial decisions, that this person called that justice or this person tried to reach that justice. And I don't know if you're comfortable answering this question, but you hear that talk, and nobody ever says, yes, it happened, or no, it didn't happen. There's always a sort of a gray answer to it. If I asked you if that ever happened, or if you were aware if that had ever happened to you or any of your colleagues, would you be able to say?
Well, there had been talks, really, but there had been no actual proof of these conversations. Naturally, because the parties know that it's unethical, they wouldn't be so open about it. No?
Unless they thought they could get away with it.
And get away with it. There are talks about that, and I would like to believe, though, that every member of the Supreme Court knows his or her responsibility and would act in accordance with the highest ethical standards that our people and our law expect.
And no one ever tried to influence a decision of yours improperly?
In my case, personally,
I
I don't think anybody has ever influenced my vote or my own decisions.
But did anyone ever attempt to?
In many ways. For instance, newspapers do. You read items in the papers, broadcasters do.
I'm not saying
Indirectly, you know.
yeah.
Not a flagrant say, you do this or
Yeah.
that in exchange for this or that.
Yeah.
When, you know, columnists or when broadcast journalists speak, naturally they tend to influence in the sense of argue. That's all right, in my opinion, especially for high-profile cases where the public is interested.
And certainly,
And the justices should think about it. Not that they're being influenced or pressured, but that there might be arguments that they have not taken into account.
and certainly the justices don't live in a bubble, isolated from reality. I mean,
We
no
would like
matter-
to think that we do. However, that cannot be complete. You cannot be, a justice or a judge cannot be completely isolated from the environment.
So public discourse on an issue is one way or another taken into account by the justices.
I would say that it may influence public interest cases, high-profile cases, may be influenced not in a bad way, but to see more arguments, more light, more light.
Do you think?
In this age of communication, in this age of the internet, you know, the thick walls of the judicial fortress have been penetrated. We cannot be forever isolated. The theory of Mount Olympus in the 50 years ago, 30 years ago, no longer applies now. Although the justices still try to be as objective as they can.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing? That to some extent decisions are influenced by the level of public discourse?
It's good in the sense that perspectives are given by people in the know. And the justices are afforded an opportunity to think even more deeply, particularly in public interest cases, where the general public has an interest. In strictly private cases, no.
So in the case, say, of Neri versus the Senate,
Yes.
executive privilege, there must have been some of the public discourse must have filtered into the chambers.
Well, I'm sure they read newspapers.
I'm sure they read you, sir.
they listen broadcast, listen to radio. But I would think that the justices have an innate sense of fairness that they can filter also.
Does that innate sense of fairness, do you think, to some extent involve the need to accommodate the appointing power? Whether they actually ask you to do so or not, but do you feel to some extent, well, you know, let's give them this one because they did put me here? Is there any
In my case, no, because I feel that the best way I can show my gratitude to the appointing authority is to do my job with integrity, with dignity, with independence.
Okay, well, we're beginning to talk about that executive privilege case. Of course, everybody has read your column, and they've talked about how some of the arguments you made. We're going to take a short break, but when we return, let's visit that case and some of the arguments being made for and against it. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.